However, I don't need to remind you that the annual increases in the health and education budgets are many times the entire legal aid budget. In Westminster on the 11th of January, Simon Hughes MP asked the Minister to examine what would have happened to the pay of the local teacher and the local general practitioner relative to the pay of the legal aid solicitor since Labour came to power. He said, and I quote, "The answer is that the legal aid solicitor will have done worse of the three." What the government has not taken into consideration, and indeed Lord Carter has made it clear publicly that this was never his remit when instructed to prepare his report, is what other costs are included in the legal aid budget and what has affected its increase, such as experts' fees and interpreters' fees, all of which are increasing given the changes we are experiencing to our society as a whole. Only 2 weeks ago, I received an estimate from a doctor instructed as an expert in a childcare case, where he was charging the legal aid fund £250 per hour. When the solicitors working on the case are currently receiving less than 1/3 of that rate of pay, it causes me to question how the legal aid budget is quantified. I do not accept that any aspect of Lord Carter's review will improve quality. On the contrary, you cannot expect quality to improve, if indeed it needs to do anyway, if you reduce fees. If anyone is in any doubt about the impact of sufficient pay on productivity and quality, I invite you to listen to the interview of the Prime Minister on Radio 4 on the 3rd of February, when in response to John Humphrey's question about the vast increase received by GPs recently, the Prime Minister was quick to defend the increase by pointing to the improvement in quality. I don't challenge the increase paid to GPs. What I do challenge is for my profession to be treated differently, with less respect and recognition. My second question is, what is the impact of the proposed reforms? Let me tell you, legal aid practitioners will diminish. Fact, not speculation. Solicitors are professional people. Undertaking legal aid work is a matter of choice. If solicitors choose not to do the work, that will be their choice, albeit, I have no doubt for the majority, a sad but unavoidable decision they will be forced to take. Secondly, law students will not be attracted to work in legal aid, and so the future of the profession will be at risk. And thirdly, clients will go unrepresented, and if you think we currently have court delays now, watch this space. And thirdly, how will the impact affect society? Solicitors will be forced to close businesses, and this will inevitably lead to unemployment. Without a new generation of legal aid lawyers, it will take years to recreate what we have today. Lastly, and most importantly, the vulnerable will go unrepresented. There will be no equality of arms. We will have the state against an individual, the individual not having the same ability and/or resources to fight his or her case. Do you know, as recently as last Sunday, I watched the Prime Minister being interviewed by Andrew Marr. He spoke about many subjects, but not once did he speak about the cuts to legal aid. I wonder why. The Prime Minister said that in his opinion we now have a fairer society. Members of the jury, ask yourselves this. In forming his opinion, do you think the Prime Minister has taken into consideration the effect of the Carter Review? I suggest not. I am old enough to remember what it was like for parents in the 1980s who would turn up to the old juvenile courts, their children having been removed by social services, and who didn't have the means or the ability to challenge what was happening. The permanent removal of a child is one of the most serious events that can ever occur. Those families need to be represented. They need a voice, and one that can question what the state is doing. Time and time again, I am involved in care proceedings where the actions of some professionals have to be seriously challenged. The law reports are full of such cases. These cases need the greatest of scrutiny. Another such example I can provide applies to criminal proceedings. My firm represented one of the young defendants in the first Damilola Taylor trial. At the time, and understandably, the police, the media and the public, as well as Damilola's family, wanted the culprits responsible for his death to be caught. As a member of the public, so did I. However, I wanted the right culprits caught, not just anyone suspected of the crime. The first trial collapsed. Our client was acquitted at the close of the prosecution case, and there was serious criticism of the police. In fairness to the media, and despite their very negative reporting at the beginning of the case, they recognised the flaws in the prosecution case and fairly reported the outcome. I am in little doubt that the scrutiny of the evidence by the defence teams led to the defendants' acquittals, and quite rightly so, because they were innocent. Whilst it may be said by the Legal Aid Minister that the case of Damilola Taylor would fall outside what is envisaged for fixed fees, the reality of the situation is that legal aid lawyers who specialise in general high street crime deal with all areas of crime. Unless they receive sufficient remuneration for every case they do, the risk is they will not continue to undertake any legal aid work at all, and cases such as the first Damilola Taylor trial will undoubtedly suffer as a consequence. Let us also not forget what was happening in the 1970s and the 1980s, before the Police and Criminal Evidence Act provided for the duty solicitor scheme. We saw many miscarriages of justice. My generation will never forget the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6. That's the level of risk we take if we reduce access to justice. I am not interested in swings and roundabouts. I am a lawyer, not the manager of a fun fair. Fees on the whole are entirely unacceptable. It is not always possible to evaluate the amount of work necessary in such a case at the outset. Care proceedings, for example, are often evolving situations and can change direction, particularly if, for example, a medical expert's opinion differs to that of the examining doctor. The case I had recently was believed to involve nothing more than general bruising, possibly due to rough handling. 3/4 of the way through the case, the medical expert opinion was that there had been an attempted strangulation, somewhat different to what the examining doctors had believed to be the case. Well, members of the jury, I'm now coming to the end of my speech. I urge you to consider the evidence which has been presented. I say that this government has failed miserably to satisfy you that there is any relevant or reliable evidence upon which you could return a verdict in support of the government's position. As someone who has been in this area of law since 1982, I recognise the importance of making a difference. Members of the jury, many of you are the new generation. Don't be dissuaded from entering legal aid. Society needs you. There is nothing more satisfying or rewarding than feeling that you have made a difference, hopefully for the better. You will come up against obstacles: government criticism, public lack of recognition, press ridicule, less pay, less favourable working conditions. You still with me? But ultimately you will live with your own conscience, in the hope that in time, and I have to say I have no doubt, the pendulum will change. Given my age and experience, I see myself as a senior member of the profession. I believe it is incumbent on me, and indeed my fellow senior professionals, to put the case for the new generation. And this, I assure you, I will do with every ounce of energy I can muster. I would like to leave you with a quote by Robert Kennedy when he was Solicitor General, and which I believe should be an inspiration to you as the future generation of legal aid lawyers. Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. I urge you to return a verdict of not guilty to all allegations rendered by the government, and to call for a thorough review of Lord Carter's proposals.